Look at this image. 66 years after the first powered flight, a human being walked on the surface of the moon and planted a flag. It stands as a defining achievement of modern scientific collaboration. 2 decades later, the physical walls dividing democratic and authoritarian states in Europe were literally torn down by celebrating crowds. Today, representatives from nearly 200 nations gather in buildings like this one to negotiate trade, human rights, and international law. Yet all of this, the space exploration, the open borders, the global diplomacy, relied entirely on the defeat of one man and the military machine he built. In the early 1940s, the outcome of the Second World War hinged on just a few variables: Germany failing to cross the English Channel, the Russian winter arriving before Moscow fell, and the United States entering the conflict when it did. If any of those specific conditions had gone the other way, the reality we know is erased. In its place, an aggressive, authoritarian empire dictates the course of the 20th century. This map illustrates how the geography of Europe changes under a total Nazi victory. Existing national borders dissolve into a vast, centralized empire. Administrative control radiates outward from Berlin, systematically stripping independence from nations like France, Poland, and Belgium. Across the Channel, an isolated Britain faces an impossible choice. Cut off from overseas support and facing constant siege, the British Empire either signs a suffocating peace agreement or suffers a total colonial collapse. The Eastern Front determines the fate of the remaining continent. In our timeline, extreme weather and sheer attrition allowed Soviet forces to hold the line. If that defense breaks early, the Soviet Union collapses. Without a functioning Soviet government, the global spread of communism stops abruptly. The political ideology loses its main engine for expansion across Asia and beyond. The decades-long standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union never happens. The massive power vacuum left by a defeated Soviet state is filled entirely by a dominant Berlin. Across the Atlantic, the United States remains physically untouched. Protected by 2 oceans and possessing a massive scale of industrial manufacturing, America survives the fall of Europe. However, the country abandons any ambition of leading a free global alliance. Outnumbered and facing a unified, hostile continent, Washington adopts a strictly defensive, isolationist posture. This map highlights the resulting global standoff. You have a heavily fortified North America on one side and a massive Euro-Asian bloc on the other, divided by stark, pulsating defensive lines running down the Atlantic. America shifts from an exporter of democracy to a heavily militarized state. The nation's entire economy and foreign policy are consumed by the need to contain the empire across the ocean. The space race was driven by intense competition between the US and the Soviets. Without that specific rivalry demanding rapid advancements in rocketry, missions like the lunar landing lose their primary source of urgency and funding. Progress in aviation, advancements in medicine, and early computing slows down. International collaboration vanishes, leaving scientific discovery isolated within competing, paranoid borders. Inside the occupied territories, basic freedoms are entirely removed. Governments enforce severe cultural repression, strictly limit international travel, and use brutal military force to suppress underground resistance movements. The rapid innovation and interconnected culture of the 20th century is replaced by global stagnation. Societies turn inward, forced to live under strict authoritarian surveillance. It is easy to assume that an Axis military victory in the 1940s would secure a permanent, stable empire. This graph tracks the lifespan of historical empires. It shows a consistent pattern. Rapid territorial expansion is almost always followed by steep economic decline. Maintaining rigid control over vast, diverse populations drains resources at an unsustainable rate. Over decades, economic pressure mounts. New generations born under occupation inevitably form underground alliances, triggering fresh internal conflicts that strain the central leadership. Military triumph rarely produces lasting stability. Rather than a finalized world order, an Axis victory would have likely initiated a fractured, chaotic era defined by continuous rebellion and systemic decay. Look closely at the systems you interact with today, the elections you participate in, the open internet you browse, the borders you can freely cross. None of these conditions were guaranteed. They exist because of a highly specific sequence of strategic choices, massive human sacrifices, and a few crucial battles that tipped the balance. History does not follow an inevitable path. The entire direction of human progress can reverse course based on a single strategic mistake. The reality we experience is fragile. The actions and decisions we make today are the sole architects of what the world will look like tomorrow.